TCI is brought to you by Spendthrift's leading sire Malibu Moon. Best of luck to the connections of Governor Malibu, Stanford, and Karina Mia in major Grade 1 races Saturday at Belmont.
Welcome back to TCI, your inside track to the Triple Crown. Alongside Joel Cunningham, I'm John Siegel. Well, Joel, this is the last leg of the Triple Crown. It's the Belmont Stakes. And it's always interesting with this race. If you don't have the Derby winner back in here, there's not that rematch, you know, like you'd have Exaggerator and Nyquist. He's not in here. So we really got to dig into this race and pull out the contenders because it still looks like it's going to be a pretty interesting race this year.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you almost get a full field in here, and that's probably somewhat, you know, the distance, people taking a shot. I mean, look, it's not hard to look back at past results in the last 10 years, start seeing the Datars and Ruler on Ices and some wacky results. I mean, you get it once every 2 or 3 years. And I think it's that distance and the fact that also this is the third race in 5 weeks for the horses like Exaggerator. You know, is going to be your heavy favorite in here. Coming back, maybe people feel like maybe he's vulnerable, and also without Nyquist in the field, maybe they feel like there's an opportunity here to get a classic for themselves.
Well, let's jump right in here and look at the TCI top 10, and let's look at a prime example, and that's the horse that you move in at number 9. That's Seeking the Soul. Joel, that horse has just broke his maiden, and I think it took a couple tries for him to do that. Now we see him showing up in the Belmont. You got him in at number 9. Tell me why.
He's an interesting horse. You know, Dallas Stewart, I tell you what, he knows how to train a classic horse. Just look at the Derby results the last few years. When he's had horses like Commanding Curd, Golden Soul, you know, running second in the race that, you know, clearly were a class below. So you know Dallas can get a horse ready. The key with this horse is his ability to get the distance. I mean, he's shown quality. I mean, first time out, he ran a really good second behind Sonoma Crush. A nice little Stone Street 3-year-old in his first time out, going 6 furlongs. Had a little bit of break, something happened there. Came back against that nice horse, Jazzy Times, on Derby Day. Johnny V liked him enough to ride the horse. Now, he rode blinkers on there, didn't get a good trip, didn't fire. That was sprinting, stretched him out to a 1-turn mile, and he ran a pretty good race to beat Jimbo Fallon. But like you said, even though the speed figure was good, that was maiden company, John.
Right.
The thing that you like about this colt, potentially coming back, and he's also coming back on short rest. I mean, he raced on May 29th. The key with him is the distance. You know, if you're, again, a big fan of a horse that, you know, has a little bit of quality and maybe a live long shot that can, you know, stretch out to a 1.5 mile distance successfully, maybe more than his contemporaries, maybe that moves him up and gives him a shot to maybe hit the board.
All right, so I look here, Wild About Deb. We know now that horse did not enter. I know you were taking a guess there that you thought that horse would enter.
Yeah. And he was a horse I thought had a long shot chance of hitting the board too, but yeah, he did not wind up going in.
But now that slot is open, so I'm gonna put you on the spot. Tell me who would you fill his spot with?
Cherry Wine. Again, I don't like his pedigree to handle the distance. He was the runner-up in the Preakness, so based on closing class, I would put him in the 10 spot. But again, we're getting pretty far down the list at this point.
You know, you mentioned he placed in the Preakness, but he also placed in the Bluegrass Stakes. So he's had 2 races where he's come running late to, you know, try to jump up there and get the money.
Sure.
Tell me a long shot that you see in this Belmont field. You know, this is one of those races that you mentioned is just so wide open. Tell me a horse that maybe somebody's just not even thinking about that you think has a big shot in this year's Belmont.
Well, I mean, I mentioned Seeking the Soul, who, you know, you'd have to give an outside shot. It's going to be a huge price, again, on paper. From a class standpoint, he doesn't look like he belongs in the same. I mean, he looks like a horse that if he runs in a 1X, he'd be 5-1. Now he's running the Grade 1 Belmont. Again, the thing that makes sense of it all, from a pedigree standpoint, you start digging into his numbers. He's a horse that's going to handle the distance. So I do, from that standpoint, Seeking the Soul is going to be a horse that'll be on some of my tickets, believe it or not, because again, he grades out, figures to be a horse that I think can handle the trip. Lonnie, the Japanese colt.
Yeah.
You know, they've been waiting to run this horse 1.5 miles. Again, we talked about it last week. You know, you look at that Heavenly Romance top class race mare that he's out of. You know, when you look at the Sunday Silence, that Japanese female family, you know, a lot of European blood in there, a lot of 1.5 mile or longer horses in there. He's a colt that really, from his Derby performance to his Preakness performance, showed an improvement. And I think going further at 1.5 miles, I think he can be on the board. The question with Lonnie is, John, he's been so devoid speed, and you don't need a lot of speed in the Belmont. I mean, they're going to fall out of there, other than Gettysburg, who entered the race late, going to the lead. You're probably not going to see much hustling out of the gate. It's going to all be about going to the fence and finding position, getting a horse into a rhythm. So from that standpoint, Lonnie won't be far behind the pace because it's going to be so slow. However, he has to put himself in position. If he's got to pass a dozen horses on the turn, he's not going to get it done. But I do think he'll keep coming. He's the type of horse at 1.5 miles and based on their Japanese training, they've worked this whole horse a lot. I think he's a horse from a stamina standpoint that can be on the board at 1.5 miles.
All right, well, you mentioned Gettysburg. Let's talk about that because this is kind of a key horse. You know, WinStar made a pretty aggressive move putting this horse into the race. We know that they transferred him from Todd over to Steve. You know, we were talking about it. You have to have that card if you're going to play it. They have the card. They want to play it. They're going to put him in there. But this affects so many horses, including your current number 1, Destin, because now there's a whole different strategy. You know this horse is going to go out and he's going to set a pretty good pace.
He's going to go out, but I think that, you know, when you look at the other tactical horses in the race that figured to show speed, if Gettysburg wouldn't have shown up, and that's, you know, ironically, Todd Pletcher's horses, Stradivari, Johnny V, and you got another smart local rider in Destin, you know, when you're talking about Javier Castellano. You know, I thought before Gettysburg jumped in, I thought Stradivari would be on the lead. I thought Destin sit right off of him. They gallop around there through moderate fractions, and I really thought both those horses would have a big opportunity to go on. I still feel that way because I think they're just going to let Gettysburg go. Johnny V rode Gettysburg last time out. They know he's a rabbit in this race. I don't think they're concerned about him at all. They're going to let him go, do his thing with Paco Lopez out of the gate. And the interesting thing would be how much does Paco try to reserve and actually try to set a fast pace, but hedge his bets too, that he, you know, maybe can hold on to something and at least make, you know, when Stradivari and Destin, when they push the button on their horses, that maybe he makes them run a little earlier perhaps than they wanted to. So there's a real jockey's race there, but the fact that you got 2 good local riders in Johnny B and Javier that know their horses and know Gettysburg, I think they're going to let him go, and it should not affect the race from their standpoint.
You know, it was really set up for WinStar with Creator in here, but it also could help another one of their horses, and that's the morning line favorite. That's Exaggerator. I know they don't own the horse, but the horse will eventually, you know, go to WinStar for stud duty. So it really plays into both of those horses. It could help Exaggerator as well to have that kind of speed on the front. Yeah,
I mean, it's a sporting move, you know, by Elliott Walden and WinStar here to do this. I mean, they're trying to assure whatever they can do to try to set up a fast pace. I mean, they've got, again, 2 interests in here. If you can have a 2-time Classic winner by Curling coming to stud, or even Creator, Grade 1 winner by Tappet, who can win the Belmont.
Right.
I mean, that's a major race. Elliott Walden, he won the Belmont with Victory Gallop as a trainer. He knows how big this race is for the WinStar ownership group, and the fact that he has 2 closers in the race, both of them that are prime Grade 1 contenders. He certainly wants to inject some speed in this race, and that's what Gettysburg's going to do.
Yeah, he won it with Victory Gallop. He almost won it with Commissioner on the front end, and they won it with Drosselmeyer, so they know this race pretty well. All right, so now we've kind of looked at the field. We've talked about it a little bit. Now it's time. Tell me, who do you think is going to win this year's Belmont Stakes?
Yeah, I mean, I love the tactical speed from Destin and Stradivari, and I love Destin's ability and his pedigree profile to see it out. I just think he can clip along those 12.5-second furlongs, John, and keep going. If Javier can save ground, get him into a rhythm, get him into the clear to where he can maybe make first or second run and get a jump on some of these closers, I think if he's there at the quarter pole, they're not going to catch him from the quarter pole to the wire because, again, not a lot of horses are switching positions this race. I think if you can blow the race open, turn it for home, you've got an opportunity to stay and see it out in 1.5 miles. He has the pedigree for me to do that and the tactical speed. So Destin, a horse that, again, I think probably is going to benefit off his Derby. He's a horse that's mentally, you know, kind of come along a little later than maybe his physical maturity.
Sure.
And I do think that he's a colt now, training locally at Belmont, doing well. I like Destin to win this race. I think he's got a better chance to win this race. I feel more confident in him winning this than I did even in the Derby. Of course, it's tough to feel confident in the Derby, but he's my horse for this race. How about you?
You know, you're staying on your horse. He's been number 1. He's a horse that you really liked. I'm going to stay with my horse. I'm going to stay with Creator. I didn't think that he really got a chance to run there in down the lane in the Derby. I think he got sawed off.
He did.
So I think he's going to have a bigger chance here. Plus, listen, Bobby Flay, New York City. I mean, he's in on the horse now, so how can you go wrong with that? I'm going to go with Creator.
Well, he'd be a crowd favorite if he won, certainly with Bobby Flay and the familiar WinStar colors there. And let me just say this, too, about a horse I think can run underneath Destin. For people that are playing this and want to know what I think about the contenders based on their class, style, you know, draw, where they're going to fit in the race, and whether or not they have that stamina and appear to be coming into the race the right way. My overall conclusion is I like Destin the best. I think Stradivari, again, is a horse that's going to trip out phenomenally here. I don't know how the track's going to play. We should be dry. Hopefully we won't get any rain. There's a little rain in the forecast Saturday. But if it's beachy and in typical Belmont that's playing fair and there's not really a bias or even if there is a bias, you know, even if it's speed type bias, certainly will help him out a little bit. I think Stradivari's training well enough for them to enter in here. I think, you know, certainly stocking's not going to be an issue for him. He didn't need the lead in this race, never really had the lead in his life. I think he runs a big race. The question for him is, you know, does he have enough foundation and enough pedigree to see it out all the way? Because I think he's a top colt. But I think he fires. And other horses, I mentioned Lonnie. I think Lonnie's a horse you have to play in here. I mentioned live long shot, Seeking the Soul is going to be maybe one of the longest shots on the board in here, John. And then Brody's Cause and Creator. Brody's Cause, another horse again. You saw him number 2 in the TCI Top 10. I thought his pictures training for this race, he's looked phenomenal. Dale Romans worked him a mile at Churchill, really trying to put that stamina work into him. So if you like medal count a couple years ago, Brody's Cause is a 2-time Grade 1 winner now coming over with a pedigree to handle a mile and a half. You have to respect him. My only question for him is, again, how far back is he going to come from out of it?
Sure.
Break him from the 12 hole. A little concern there on how much ground he can save and whether or not he can make up all those lengths passing horses. That's why I like a tactical horse like Destin's better, but you certainly have to use them. Those are going to be the horses I use. And you mentioned, you know, earlier, Exaggerator's not in that group for me. I will have to use him a little bit on class, but he's not amongst the top 4 that I like in the race.
All right, well, thank you, Joel. It'll be an interesting race to watch, that's for sure.
Yep.
Look forward to recapping it next week. Thank you guys for watching again. Make sure you come back next week. We'll recap the Belmont, and it'll be time to start talking about the Breeders' Cup.